All right, so welcome to the No Code Legacy Upgrade webinar that we are running today. So let's go to the next slide here. So my name is Matt. I'm a product evangelist here at Tyke, and I will be walking you through some of this stuff today. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover what is SOAP. So I think most folks that join this will probably know what SOAP is, but if someone's working with a really new stack or a recent graduate, they may not know what SOAP is. So we'll go over that very briefly. Then we're going to cover why you would go from SOAP to REST and a few facts about why. Then we'll look at kind of the meat of our presentation today, which is Tyke body transformations. And that is the easy way to transform your incoming and outgoing traffic. Then I'm going to show you a quick demo of how to do it. And you're going to be, I think you'll be quite impressed with how quickly we can take a SOAP web service and put a RESTful facade on it in probably about 5 minutes or so. So some history of SOAP. Let's take a look here. So SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. Okay, it's a messaging protocol specification used to exchange information through network-enabled web services. And this is kind of, if you go back, it's kind of the OG standard for doing this type of stuff. Designed in 1998 for use at Microsoft, and it was pretty much available for widespread use in 1999. If you've worked in any legacy systems, I'm sure you'll be familiar with WSDL, XML schema, that kind of stuff. Well, this is the underlying layer for those web services. SOAP uses XML and only XML. It allows for clients to receive and send data independent of language and platform. And that was one of the big pluses of it. As we were starting to scale out, more languages were coming around, different ways of doing things. There had to be a common way, and SOAP really filled that void. And SOAP was the go-to technology for any service that is and was internet enabled up until REST came onto the scene. So reasons for moving away from SOAP. So from my experience, almost all of the enterprises that I've worked in have looked to move away from SOAP. The big difficulty with moving away from SOAP is the fact that it's extremely expensive to do. Because when you move away from SOAP, you're rewriting your web services and you're likely rewriting all of your clients and consumers as well. And that might not be possible. And we're going to cover today a way that you can do that without having to rewrite any of your existing stuff that is leveraging it. So why SOAP to REST? Well, if you've worked with modern JavaScript front-end languages, you're going to have a way easier time with JSON than XML. And I'm going to show you how to turn it into a JSON style RESTful facade today. RESTful endpoints can support multiple content types. SOAP only supports XML. REST can offer better performance, and that's usually one of the ways that can be done is actually done through caching static content. Unfortunately, SOAP can't do that. And lastly, and this is just a little list that I've compiled from my experiences, is that REST has moved in to become the standard for modern applications. SOAP generally leads to more work and less performance. And what I have also found is that if I'm hiring new folks or moving people around in the company, they don't have experience with SOAP, it's one of those things where it may be very, very tough to bring them up to speed. So having everything done or exposed in a RESTful fashion is probably the easiest way to get up and going. Now let's look at using Tyke for traffic transformations. And for that, we're going to use the Tyke Body Transform plugin. So today we're going to use Tyke's Body Transform plugin, which comes by default with Tyke. So if you've been on one of our CE calls or a sales call, you're going to see that we talk about it being batteries included. That is one of those components. And the plugin really allows you to transform request and response bodies to fit your exact use case. And we can see that there's tons of different scenarios where we may find this useful, even outside of what I'm doing today. You could even use the body transform stuff to take an existing RESTful service, and maybe you want to tweak what the front end, the facade of it looks like, you can use it to do that as well. Today, we're going to just be looking at the SOAP to REST conversion. So a couple facts on this, okay? Middleware uses a Go template to specify the transformation. Still technically no code, but you do need to write a template for it. Very easy, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Allows you to do it all with no code, and you can do it all right in the dashboard. All of it's available right in the Tyke dashboard. Another nice little feature is this ability, there's a widget built into that body transform plugin, which allows you to test that transformation for accuracy. And that is great. Instead of, going through using Postman or something to send stuff through to the gateway and then test to make sure, you can do it all right in the plugin itself. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So let's start to implement this. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to look at creating an API from a WSDL. We're going to import the WSDL. That's the first step. Sometimes when you import WSDLs, you may find that it doesn't quite import correctly. Not an issue with Tyke, not an issue with the WSDL. It's just depends how that WSDL is built. You might get some weird paths and that kind of stuff. And I did pick a WSDL that has that, so I can show you how to edit that. Very simple, very easy to do. You don't have to do it, but sometimes it looks a little nicer. Then we're going to add the body transform and the modify headers plugins into, I'm only going to do one endpoint today. This WSDL that I'm putting in actually has 2 endpoints, but we're just going to convert a single endpoint today. Then after that, we're going to create the request and response transformations, and we'll plug in the templates. I'll show you even how to test it using that little widget that's there as well. And then we're going to add a content type header for the request and the response, just to make sure that we get it in the right format going in and coming back. And then we're going to test it out using Postman. Now I will make a little edit. I'll probably do the content type header first. It doesn't matter when you do that. It's all part of the setup. So I'll probably do that first. I'm finding that's a little bit easier. So let's bring up my browser. And what you're going to see is, let me just refresh here. I might have been logged out at this point. We can do a save. Now I am running Tyke locally. So if you want to know more about how to do that, I did publish a video recently that shows you how to set it up in the exact same way that I have here. And it should take you about 10 to 15 minutes. And you will find that you'll need a key to be able to do that. You can reach out to me, or you can reach out to any of our Tyke account managers, and we'd be happy to set you up with that. All right, so when you first come into the dashboard, you're going to see this. You're going to see this API activity dashboard. And that's not what we want. We actually want to come over here to APIs. Now I have one that I just set up a few minutes ago. So let me delete that, and we'll start with a clean slate here. So as you can see right now, I've got no API configurations to display. That's exactly what I want. Now what I'm going to do is import API. Now Tyke has a few different things that you can do here. You could do from a Tyke definition, a blueprint from Swagger. What we want is from WSDL. And I already have a SOAP web service that I know exists online, available. If you've ever used SOAP UI, this is the one that they do all their demos through. I'm going to use that. And this is a number conversion web service. And I believe it's .NET, but that doesn't really matter for our purposes. So I'm going to take the URL minus the WSDL portion. I'm going to take the URL and I'm going to plug that into my upstream target. And that is where I want all of this traffic to actually go to. Then I need to paste the WSDL into this section right here. So I'm going to take this and copy it, and we'll paste it in here. Now I do know that there is an issue with this WSDL, and it's specifically with this script tag. So I'm going to take this out. Then I'm going to click Generate API. And just like that, you'll see there, I have a number conversion API now, and that's using the WSDL, and it read the WSDL, and now it's going to generate the endpoints for me. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm just going to make sure that I have the authentication mode set to open keyless, which it should be by default in the current version, but we want to make sure of that just to make sure that we don't have any authentication stuff, since I'm just showing you how to do the body transformation portion. So all's good there. Now we're going to come over to Endpoint Designer. And let me bring up my trusty Word document just to make sure that I don't miss any steps here, even though I've done this about 100 times at this point. Okay, so we're going to do the number to dollars endpoint. That's what we're going to work on here. So I'm going to open that up, and you'll see URL rewrite is going to be there by default. Now, what you will notice is you'll see that it says number conversion / number conversion / number to dollars. I don't really want that. I don't want that long of a path. It's not necessary for me to have that path. So I'm going to take my relative path here and just change it to numbers to dollars. And you'll see that it looks a little bit cleaner. URL rewrite, I'm going to do the same thing right here and just chop that off. Perfect. Okay. So now the next thing that I need to do, and I'll close this up, the next thing that I need to do is add in my modify headers and body transform plugins. So the easy way to add, and the only way to add the plugins, is in this Endpoint Designer, unless you're using our APIs to do it, but I'm going to add the plugin here. So I'll click body transform, and you'll see that body transform has been added. I'm also going to add modify headers. Okay. So now I have both of these. And this is all the plugins that we need to do this. It should take us a couple minutes from now to just set these up. As I mentioned, the first thing I'm going to do is actually change the headers. Even though in the slideshow I said I was going to do that last, I'm thinking this might be a little easier for us. So let's do that first. So for the request, what we want to do is we want to change the content type to text / XML. Because text and XML, text / XML is actually what's going to be going to our SOAP web service. So we want to make sure that we have that format correct. Then I'm going to click add, and you see that it's added in. Then we come over to response, and what I'm going to do here is, again, add content type. This is what's going to be coming back in the response, and we are going to be returning a JSON response. And we'll change this to application / JSON. And I'm going to click add. That's all we need to do for the modify headers portion. That is it. That is all. So we'll close that up. Then we'll come to the body transform. So input type, this is the request. It's going to be coming in JSON. Perfect. So what we need to do is we need to map this JSON into the SOAP request that needs to go to that SOAP web service. And luckily I've already created that, so we don't have to parse through it, although I'm going to explain it quickly. Now using SOAP UI, what I did was I actually had SOAP UI create a couple of requests and responses for me. That's how I pulled this. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And if you do have questions on that, I'm more than happy to show you how to do that as well. But in case you want to use another tool, I didn't go over that. So this is what our SOAP request to the endpoint would look like. You're going to have an envelope, a header, a body, and this is where we really need to focus. And it's this number to dollars, and then this denum element that's there. What we want in that denum element is going to be our number that's going to be converted. And I added that into a Go template here. So that's the double squiggly braces and then dot number to convert. That means that our input in our JSON object that we're passing to that RESTful service, it needs to have a element called number to convert in it. And that would look roughly like this here. So this will be what basically this is our giant SOAP request that we would have had, but when we actually redesign this, let's just do number to convert. So number to convert, I'm passing 33. What I should see in this output, and this is the little testing widget that I was telling you about, what we should see is that 33 should be placed into here. So let's try it out and see. Perfect, exactly what we wanted. So you see the 33 injected there. That request can then go to our SOAP web service. So now the SOAP web service gets that data. Now it's going to return it back to us in that response. So now we need to come over to response to do that. Our input type, since it's coming back from the web service, is going to be XML. So we change that to XML. And again, I've already created all of these templates before, but as you can see, they're quite easy to create, not too tough. So let's paste this in and take a look at this. So the template, we want to return back a object that has a field called converted number, and it's going to have that number to dollar result baked into it. So now we need to know roughly what in order to build this, I had to know what my XML response was coming back. And I have one of those available right here, and we'll go over it quickly. So that's what my input would look like. This is what would come back from the SOAP web service, and this is what does come back from the SOAP web service. We have envelope. Obviously, you're going to have your namespace concatenated onto the front. We don't need to worry about the namespace when we're building the template. All we need to worry about is the actual element name. So we have envelope, which you'll see is here. Then we have body, because header is a closed tag. There's nothing in it. Then we have body, number to dollars response, and then number to dollars result. And you'll see that's exactly how it's mapped here. Body, number to dollars response, number to dollar result. That means that type will go in, grab that data, inject it into this template, and then return that value back to the user. So we're not going to have 33. We're going to see something like this. $33 is what should be returned. I should see this come back now in that output. And there we go. So that is what we expected. And this is nice because if you have a really complex schema that you're going through, you don't want to have to test this through Postman every single time. You can do it right in the designer itself. So our next step here is to update the API. So update, save it, awesome. Then at that point, we now have everything good to go. So let's actually try and test this with Postman. Let's see if this works for us. I'm hoping it does. It might be embarrassing for me because I've done this so many times so far. Let's start we'll do a new request here. And I'm going to click an old one that I just did. Our endpoint is going to be on the gateway, and the gateway is running on port 8080. So 8080 / number conversion / number to dollars, that is our endpoint that we just created. Our body, I'm going to pass it number to convert. I'm going to pass it 33. What should happen is this should actually go to the live SOAP endpoint that's running on that dataaccess.com. Dataaccess.com, that SOAP endpoint, is then going to do its work, return back to type, and then from there, it's going to return back the result, all without any code. And as you can see, we did this in just a couple minutes. So let's do a send here. Let me just full screen it. Send, and just like that, there we go. $33 comes back. Now, what is the power of being able to do this? I would say from my experience, generally in enterprise, what happens is we put off these kind of projects because they cost a lot of money and they take a lot of planning, because sometimes you may have client applications that are using stuff that you are just unsure about. It takes a lot of mapping. It takes a lot of architecture review to figure out, okay, when we change the service or decommission the service, what's going to be affected? And then once you figure out what's affected, then you're going to have to rewrite all of those in order to consume a RESTful endpoint. And if you have other services that are built many, many years ago, you may find that they don't play well with JSON. So this is a great way to allow your existing web services to stay up, and then also allow newer clients and consumers to use a JSON front end. And that is pretty much all there is to it. So you can, if you want to see this in a very, very short form, there is a YouTube video that's out there where I recorded exactly what was done here, but it's just very concise. There's no explanations. It's just bing, bang, boom. And within 5 minutes, you'll be up and running. Pretty easy to translate into your own. If you're doing a SOAP conversion, you should be able to use this tiny little proof of concept to very quickly scale it out. It shouldn't be too tough to do. And we'll come back to the presentation here for a minute. So what's next? Let's wrap up here. Well, then we'll take some questions after. So what's next? So if you're interested in using this, you know, get a hold of us and you can start this within a couple minutes. So SOAP to REST conversions, do your first POC in 5 minutes, and then maybe even do your first production or dev endpoint on your own code in just a matter of minutes. And I'm more than happy to discuss that kind of stuff as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And my contact info is matt@tyke.io, and email me at any time with any questions that you have, and I'm more than happy to go over the details of this with you. So if there's any questions, I will turn over to that now. So we do have a question here, which says, if I use Tyke to create a RESTful facade, then I don't have to do any work on the underlying web service for this to work, correct? And that is correct. So if you have a web service that's already up and running, Tyke is just going to leverage that. Tyke will actually use it almost as a consumer, right? So if you were to bring a new client on board to that SOAP web service, it would be the same as Tyke leveraging that. So Tyke basically is a new client of that web service. No changes need to be made to the web service for the Tyke component to work. And yeah, it's that simple. And the great part about that is, since you can leave that web service up, you don't need to do all the research to figure out, okay, when I rewrite this web service, what other stuff is it leveraging and what other stuff do I need to change as well? No worries. You can just create those endpoints and away you go. Your new consumers that want a RESTful or JSON front end are going to be able to use that. I saw Tyke released a GraphQL feature. Is it possible to expose a SOAP web service in GraphQL? Well, that's a really good question, actually. And yes, you absolutely can. So once you create that RESTful facade, that is going to become a Tyke RESTful endpoint. With our new GraphQL feature, you will be able to take that Tyke RESTful endpoint and then stitch that into a GraphQL schema, or just expose that as a GraphQL component. So yeah, the same way that you basically follow the same steps that we did here. You would convert it into a RESTful endpoint first, then you would pull it over into the GraphQL component. So could someone less technical also work to do these conversions if developers were tied up and didn't have cycles to complete? Absolutely. I think that it would be quite simple for someone less technical to be taught how to do that Go template. You basically have to show them how XML works, how to map it out, and then how to create those templates in that with Go. But it shouldn't be too tough, especially if you showed them how to use something like SOAP UI. They could create requests and responses from the WSDL first, move them over into Tyke, and then use those kind of pre-canned, take out what they need, put the template brackets in and get it going. And then the nice part is since you're able to test right in that widget itself, then they would be able to make sure that it did work as it should. And you could even have, maybe what you would have is you'd have someone with one of your API teams say, okay, this is what the output should be, and then they can confirm that. So they would be able to do kind of end to end, even if they were less technical. I can't see it being much harder than writing in a Word document. As long as they had access to Tyke, they would most definitely be able to do it. Perfect. Well, we're coming up pretty much at the end of our time here. Thanks for joining. And yeah, hope to see everybody over the next few weeks. We've got quite a few webinars coming up. So really excited for everyone to join and learn more about Tyke and see how Tyke can help their API journey.